This next segment in our ongoing, long-running series on simulation and immersion in roleplay is about in-character and out-of-character knowledge. In more than one style of play, the issue of knowledge, particularly in-character versus out-of-character knowledge, can become a problem. It doesn't have to, of course, but like anything else, it often does. And this is not particularly a fault that new gamers or gamers of a particular style fall prey. It's just something that happens. Now, sharp-eared listeners to other segments in this series, especially those with some grounding in the idea of simulationism, may have thought some of the suggestions that I have made were a little unusual, certainly not traditional. For example, splitting the party, and the idea of, let's say, a more collaborative approach to establishing the campaign itself. Some people have an easier time than others at keeping what they know and what their character knows separate. Fair enough. Like any other aspect of the game, there are skills that need to be developed. There is patience that needs to be exerted, and there is development or growth in the hobby over time. So not everybody can grasp the simple math that's involved in some games, and certainly some people don't grasp the complicated math that's in others. Some people have trouble articulating clearly what they want their character to do, and they need a little help. Some people have difficulty acting emotionally in front of even their closest friends. Some people can't roleplay unless they're drunk. Some people can't compartmentalize. It's easy to get distracted by the problems that crop up in any kind of skill around the table. And this particular issue is no different. In-character knowledge versus out-of-character knowledge. And in the type of play that we're describing in this series, this immersive play style, this simulationism, as I call it, it's particularly prone to this issue among some players. Right? Your character wouldn't know that, or you can't make that decision because your character wouldn't know that. So it could be things like skills that you have that it's very unlikely, improbable, or just flat out not true that your character would have. Or you make a bad decision because your character is an expert at something which you clearly are not. Or it could be your knowledge of events is superior. Right? Your vantage point on the events is superior. So in simulationist play, doing things, some things which I've suggested earlier in the series, right? Being involved in a scene where the party is split and you, the player, are privy to the information of what's going on in the other half of the group. This is traditionally not done in simulation for this very reason. To not burden the player with any knowledge that their character wouldn't have, if at all possible. All right? So there's already this active process as you're trying to explore your character. There's this active internal process of excluding knowledge that your character wouldn't know. So the game master and the other players try not to add to the burden of that by leaving it out. And this is all coming down to a social problem. So for some groups, this is an issue. For other groups, it's not an issue. For some groups, this has never even crossed their minds as being a problem. And of course, on the other end of the extreme, this is, for some groups, the sole reason why this type of play is impossible. Okay, obviously I don't believe any of this spectrum. Well, I guess I believe that it's not a problem. So, rather than focusing on that problem, which, as I've just said, is a social problem that a group needs to work out so that they can have a good time. Right? It's related to their own group. Let's not waste any further time on that. Time is such a trap. Let's instead focus on what the individual player can do, particularly in a simulationist immersive game to help police this issue internally. Right? So the in-character or out-of-character split, just in your own watch, your own purview. So, out-of-character questions certainly have a place in any game, particularly if you didn't understand what the game master just said. However, there is a decision that needs to be made, which is, do I need to ask this question now? If the answer is yes, then by all means, let's ask it. But the follow-up question, which, in order to maintain immersion and preserve the quality of the simulation, the question then becomes, is there a way that I can get this information in character? Rather than saying, oh, can I ask an out-of-character question? Maybe it's possible for your character to interact with the other players, or to interact in a way that keeps everybody immersed in the scene. So here's an example. This is one I've used on my blog before, but I kind of like it. The group is approaching a bridge. All right, and let's say, for want of argument, or for sake of argument, that they're being pursued. And so their minds are naturally turning to, is it possible to destroy this bridge or not? So the materials from which the bridge is made are relevant. Now the game master's got a lot on their mind, and they describe the bridge, they describe the ravine, they describe the weather, yada yada yada, but they don't actually tell you what the bridge is made out of. Now you really, honestly, actually need to know, for your plans, what that bridge is made out of. So many players are prone, myself included, are prone to saying, what's the bridge made out of? Right? Or worse, can I ask a question? What's the bridge made out of? Rather than maybe turning to the person next to them and saying, can you see what the bridge is made of? Right? It doesn't have to flow that way. It could just be a natural question. It could be a statement of action. I'm going to look at the bridge very closely to see, if anything comes to mind about blowing it up. But again, this is all an internal process. This is, it's not something that contributes in an immersive way to the scene. It's contributing in an intellectual way to the scene. But it's not immersing the characters in their involvement there. Whereas turning to the player next to them and saying something like, can you see what it's made out of? Or, has anybody been this way before? Articulating questions that the characters would actually ask one to the other that are obvious in context to be seeking extra information, which the game master and the other players can start to fill in. Maybe you just didn't hear that the bridge was made out of wood or stone or whatever. It may have been said and you missed it. Asking the question to the players, do they know? Can you see what it's made of? Allows them to contribute to the world in a conversational way that doesn't always happen. There's so much of gaming can wind up with all the players' attention focused on the game master, or focused down on the dice, or focused on whatever. But it seems like a lot of games will flow where there's periods of combat, there's periods of interaction with NPCs, and there's periods with inter-party roleplay. And I find that a little unfortunate. And one of the reasons for this is, of course, the lack of experience with, or even the realization of, that it's possible to navigate some of these scenes in a purely roleplay way, in a role-playing way, right? In an interactive way. You can, by asking the questions that your character would ask if they were actually there, get at those nuggets of information that we traditionally, in shorthand, ask an OOC question for, an out-of-character question. Right? And it doesn't have to happen. Now, the other side of the coin. If that secret that you're just dying to know doesn't need to be asked now, write it down so you don't forget. Because eventually, that will be important. So don't not ask. But know when it's time to ask. And think about, are there ways that you can ask your questions that don't interrupt the flow of the game, that in fact add to the flow of the game? And this will be taking one further step down the road to immersing yourself in the gameplay. Talented at roleplay or not, asking questions in such a way as to engage the person sitting next to you, I think is something that anybody can get their head around. And over time, communicating in such a way that you are not interrupting or impeding the flow of the game will become second nature.